We are back with the most anticipated series in YouTube MMA history, the 100+ hours breakdown, guys. And I know you guys are gonna be like, all right, Kenny, you're not 100% on these anymore, guys. Actually, after just going 100% on the last card, one of the few people on the planet Earth who have done that on a card and Super UFC card, I was talking to the MMA gods, lowercase g, by the way. I was talking to the MMA gods. They're like, you know what, Kenny? That one fight you got wrong because of your bias, because you went for the Nigerian Usman. We have taken it away. So we're taking it away, guys. We're still 100%. Yeah, baby, yeah. Now, jokes aside, I'm excited for this. Every time I do these videos, I'm excited for it. I did a lot of footage on this one, I'm back, I'm back. We never got a pick wrong on this one, guys. Like, I think it's 8 for 8 or something. Like the success rate on this series is amazing. This is actually the highest success rate in a series in any MMA YouTube category history. You can't find another series on MMA YouTube that has this success rate. So we're going to continue that legacy here. Islam versus Ian Garry. It's going to be a fight, eh? It's going to be a fight. I'm going to be a little bit more analytical here. We're going to talk about potential path to victories too in this video. We're going to talk about it all, guys. Striking comparison, grappling comparisons, important factors, things to note. This is the best for if you're, a little bit nervous for the fight. I'm nervous. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I watched footage. I was a bit nervous. This is not an easy fight for Islam. And any Islam fan that says it's gonna be easy, I don't think they watch as much. Well, no one watch. I'm kind of weird, man. I'm a weirdo, dude. No one does as much research as me. I know that's the case, but that's why this has such a high success rate. That's the point. I do the hard part so some of you guys don't have to. So we're gonna go through all the breakdowns that we got to break down. There's a lot of things I'm going to talk about that no one else has talked about, and a lot of things people are missing about this fight that you need to know about. You need to know. So make sure you guys are liking, brother. Every single person who's watching this should at least have liked. So at least now that that's done, you guys liked it. Let's get into the breakdown. Starting off with things to note, guys, because of course there's things to note for both parties in this fight. Starting with Ian Garry. First, something to note is he has great fight IQ. Ian Garry is one of the smartest fighters of all time. I just want people to know that. Like, I feel like people don't understand. Ian Garry is really good, but one thing that makes him really good is actually how good his fight IQ is. Like, he doesn't fight dumb. He's tall and he uses his reach. Like, he's not one of those lanky fighters who just like go in there and brawl like a Dan Hooker or like a Rainy Brown. Like, he uses his reach really good. He uses his movement really good. His overall fight IQ is one of the best I've ever seen. I've noticed that when I was watching his footage, like, oh my God, he doesn't really make much mistakes. There's some bad habits we're going to get into, but as far as fight IQ goes, I think he's actually one of the best in the sport. And it's why people think he's like, people don't want to give him credit for it because they don't really know what makes him great. They're like, oh, all he does is run away. No, it's his fight IQ. So I got to applaud that. Secondly, I said he walks around at 180 and his fight night weight's around 180. He doesn't cut a lot of weight. I know welterweights who did this, like Colby Covington and stuff. It usually helps them with their endurance. But this is something to note because, like, a mid-size welterweight's JDM around 189. Same with Islam. He's around 189 on fight night. Then there's those Moraleses and those Usmans and, like, Sean Brady's. They're like towards 200 pounds on fight night. Then they're like, the Ian Garrys are lighter on that aspect and on that scale. So what that tells me in this fight, it's something to note, because if Islam gets on top of you, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be a tough situation. So it helps you with your movement, you're agile, you're hard to catch and track down because you move a lot better and you flow a lot nicer. But that lack of weight could be problematic in some grappling exchanges. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. Thirdly, I said he never fought a grappler at this level. People are going to quickly say, oh, Bilal Muhammad. It's like when I was debating bedtime and he was trying to tell me, bro, JDM stuffed Bilal's takedowns. Bilal is practically Islam. I was like, bro, it's disrespectful comparing Bilal to Islam. No offense to Bilal, but I just felt like it was really disrespectful. Some people don't get it, and some people still won't get it. They're going to be like, but Kenny, he stuffed all Bilal's takedowns, so he's going to do the same thing to Islam Makhachev. Okay, they're going to fight on Saturday. We're going to see what happens. But I just want you guys to know he's never fought a grappler like Islam Makhachev. Just understand that. Last but not least, this is his smartest opponent yet. So, like, I was applauding Ian Garry's fight IQ because he is very intelligent. He's a smart dude, but this is his smartest opponent he's ever fought. The people he's fought, I'm not saying they have poor fight IQ, but they're not Islam Makhachev fight IQ. Like, Islam Makhachev is one of those people who I, like, expect him to execute a smart game plan. I don't expect him to pull a Hamza or pull an Ilya and have a bad game plan. This is one of the smartest opponents Ian Garry's ever went against. And I know Ian Garry knows Islam's going to be smart. He's going to be aware. He's going to be present in that fight as well. So those are things to know for Ian Garry, and things to kind of look out for. Now we're going to go to things to know for Islam Makhachev. The big one, of course, he's never fought an opponent this tall. This guy's 6'3", and he's smart. He's a smart 6'3". People always tell me, oh, can the Dan Hooker fight? I actually watched that back. He made that look really easy, and he was actually pressuring. You know, I kept saying I couldn't find a fight where Islam was pressuring. That fight is not like, okay, yeah, zoom in my face. Like, grown-ass camera zooming in my face. Bye! Bye! Nah, but, like, yes, he actually pressured Hooker. He was doing a good job pressuring there. And then he ended up getting a takedown. I will say that, you know, that's kind of the only fight, but that's not really much. Like, that's like one fight. He wasn't really pressuring. He was kind of seesawing. I'll say that. But, you know, he did the right thing. He made it look easy because he did the right thing. But he's never went against a tall opponent. Like a 6'3" is the tallest one he's ever stood in front of. And it's a smart 6'3". It's like a 6'3" who's going to use his length and literally going to stick and move. He's going to hit you and you're going to have to go in a cat and mouse chase. So be prepared to do so. That's something to note, guys. The length and the size. And people always say something stupid like, oh, but Ian Garry doesn't have long arms. I'm not saying that's stupid because objectively it's true. But Ian Garry, if you actually watch when he uses his lanky striking, it has a lot to do with kicks. We're going to talk about it when I break it down as pros. But he uses his kicks really well to set up his punches. And like his reach, he uses it well. So understand that. He uses his size well. So don't try to dismiss his size with like, oh, well, he's tall, but he has T-Rex arms. Because I'm telling you right now, you're going to be very shocked when you're watching the striking in this fight if you think it's going to be, oh, he's tall, but he's not lanky. You're going to be very mistaken, especially with those stomps. Second thing to note, he must fight differently. This is something to note because there's a certain degree that footage takes you to until you realize there's not a lot of footage of the person actually fighting a certain way that would actually make them beat a certain fighter. Islam has to fight differently. He knows this, though. I see him talking about it. He knows he has to chase and he has to be aggressive in the striking, which is something he's never done. There's a first for everything, but like I want to say I did come to a plateau when watching footage on Islam where like I'm like, oh shit, he has to do something he's never done before. So that is something panic worthy. So that's why I'm a bit conflicted when I see people get on here and they're like, it's going to be really easy for Islam because Islam's the best. And then you tell them why, like, what's Islam going to do? And they start saying things and you're like, oh, he's never done that. Like, what does Islam have to do? Oh, you have to chase him. Oh, well, when I'm watching footage, I don't see it. So I see what you guys are saying. And I do feel like it's easy to say Islam's going to make it look easy because it's Islam. But that's like, you can't really do that, especially when you're watching footage. It is a bit humbling at sometimes because you're like, oh shit, you're like, he's a human being. And like the way he fights, it'll be difficult to win. I don't think he beats Ian Garry if he fights the same. That's a tough part about this thing. So he must fight differently. It's something to know, and it's probably the most important thing to know for Islam. Last thing to know, I said he always has a good game plan and good fight IQ. Like, I'm never worried about Islam pulling a Hamza, pulling a Bilal Muhammad versus JDM, you know, doing something to make the fight harder for him. Every fight I've watched of him, he had good fight IQ. You know, against Dustin Poirier, he was using good clinch striking. You know, when he couldn't take him down, he was doing enough. But against Volkanovski, I feel like he was timing the takedowns appropriately. Even when Volk was stuffing them, he would pick his shots on the feet. He won't take too much risk. He always has good fight IQ. Even in his toughest fights, he displayed good fight IQ. Against Charles Oliveira, he displayed good fight IQ. Wait for the aggressor to come forward, counter him, jump on him, and chase the finish. Don't be hesitant when he's on his back, showing his BJJ game. You know, initiate, use your clinch trips. Islam always has good fight IQ and a good game plan executed. So I'm not worried about Islam making a bad game plan. So that's fitting. So these are two conflicting things you're going to see, the things to note. Like, he has to fight differently, but he always has a good game plan. So you can expect him to fight differently. That's something I'm expecting based on what I've seen from a lot of his fights in terms of fight IQ. So those are three things to know for Islam Makhachev. Without further ado, guys, we're getting to the stylistic breakdown. I can't wait to talk about some of these points. Let's start off with the striking with Ian Garry. Striking pro. Great stomps in his kicks. Guys, he's going to stomp on Islam's legs. I know this. You know this. You can't avoid it. Islam's actually pretty heavy on that front leg. There's going to be stomps. There's going to be low kicks. Islam might get dropped by some kicks. It could be that bad. Like, I'm telling you right now, that was actually the most concerning weapon. I'm not necessarily like, and of course, like, he hyperextended Shavkat's knee, and that's the reason Shavkat's still not here. But I'm not saying that I'm worried he's going to do what he did to Shavkat and have him out for years. But I think the stomps and the kicks are distance dictators. They dictate the distance. And I will say, when you're in there with a lankier guy, you could fall victim into being on the receiving end of them, and almost makes you hesitant. Here's the thing, like, Bilal was still taking risk after getting stomped on, but like, Bilal's game plan by default is usually to pressure and be a little bit obnoxious with his pressure. That's how he beat Sean Brady. That's how he breaks a lot of these guys. Islam Makhachev's natural instinct is to be defensive and counter and moving back a lot. So I guess that's where the stomps and the kicks start to make me nervous as someone who's like a big Islam fan, because those stomps and kicks could make you pause. It could pause your game plan, especially if you're not used to it. It'll pause people who are used to pressuring. If you're used to pressuring, those stomps are going to make you not want to pressure. If you're not used to pressuring, those stomps can make you go back to your default, which is naturally not being a pressure fighter. Then we can get into a weird seesaw match where they're having a kickoff at a low kick battle. And I will put my house on Ian Garry in that aspect. So I want to say the stomps are very concerning. He's also a great stick and mover, guys. Like, he sticks and moves. He's gonna hit you, he's out of there. He's gonna hit you, he's out of there. He's gonna move a lot. He's not gonna stand in front of you typically, you know. And that's the scary part, because he's going to stick and move against you a lot, using a lot of low kicks and stuff. And then he's going to burst into like what I call his scary boxing flow state. So you're used to him moving around the octagon, you know, circling left, right, confusing you, throwing these stomps and moving. Then out of the blue, he explodes into a boxing combo or boxing flurry that usually chains together something that lands significantly. And he's like, he hits a flow state after just being abnormally passive, sitting on the outside throwing kicks. That's scary because it comes out of nowhere. And a lot of his finishing sequence comes from when he just explodes randomly into that boxing flow state. So what he's doing with those stomps is actually dictating his pace. And then once he has the pace dictated, he'll explode into the striking. And it's hard to deal with that. You can't stand with Ian Garry for 25 minutes. I don't think so. And Islam absolutely can't. Last thing I'm going to say as a pro is that some people view as a con is his head movement. He leans back. It's bad, guys, but you're going to notice something. He could actually avoid shots like that from a lot of people. The only time he really gets caught by that is, we're going to talk about it in his cons, but I'm going to say this. His head movement is really good. And I want people to not mistake in that, especially for this fight. I think he's going to do a good job moving his head. People are talking about Islam's going to go for a low, then head kick him. Islam's not going to land a clean head kick on Ian Garry. It's going to be pretty hard to do so. He's 6'3". Islam's going to have to get his legs higher than usual. And Ian Garry's eyes are pretty damn good. So I actually put head movement as a pro. It's going to be tricky to stand and trade with Ian Garry. I've given Islam a striking advantage over everyone he's fought in his entire career for a reason. Let me just say, in this fight, it's not something I'm saying he's going to have a striking advantage. I haven't said it this whole time, and there's no reason for me to lie to you guys and say that. I only say it when it's truthful. Me and Bedtime will go on life and death in that debate because I was saying, are you crazy? JDM's going to outstrike Islam? Are you out of your mind? I was actually frustrated that someone could even see a world JDM outstrikes him, because I know how good of a striker Islam is. And I'm telling you right now, he's not going to have that advantage in this fight. That should tell you something. When I'm passionate about Islam being such a good striker and telling you guys these guys have no chance, and I'm telling you right now, Islam in the feet against Ian Garry, forget it. It should be telling you something. But I got to talk about the cons for Ian Garry, because he does have some cons. It's the head movement. Now, I said the head movement was a pro, but it's also a con. Why? Because it gets exploited when you chain together combos or you're a longer opponent with long reach. Those are the people exploiting it. Shavkat's 6'1", 6'2". There's times he caught him with a 1-2 down the pipe because he extends those combos. Even Bilal was catching him sometimes because he extend those combos. You know, when he's got dropped by Song Kanan, that's a longer fighter who got him on a counter. The head movement gets exploited when you chain together combos or you're naturally a taller, longer person with reach. The problem with that is Islam isn't either of those type of fighters. Islam's not someone who usually, I'm going to say usually, unless he fights different, he doesn't usually do 1-1-2, 1-2-1. Like, he doesn't chain together stuff. He's not a Ilia Tapor. He's not a Bilal Muhammad in the boxing. Bilal actually outboxed him in their fight, if you guys didn't know. He landed more head strikes because he was like 1-1-2 and he was landing those big shots. But Bilal went in there, he chained together some combos. Islam doesn't usually do that. Can he do that this fight and change it up? Sure. It'll be different. It'll be a learning process. I'm sure he's doing it in training. He trains with some great strikers like Usman Nurmagomedov and Shchanko, so maybe, but they're also not 6'3". But my point is, it gets exploited by chained combos or going against longer people. Of course, Islam's not long, so naturally Islam's gonna have to chain together combos. Islam can exploit this head movement problem, but he's gonna have to chain together combos, which is possible, and I don't doubt he could do, but it's just something he has to do that's different. So that's a striking con. Now let's look over to Islam Makhachev, who's one of the best strikers in UFC history. Great counter striker and solid head movement, guys. His counter striking is beautiful. A lot of Islam strikes are counter strikes. He'll duck down. He'll try to overhand you. After he counters you, he'll combine some clinch strikes, which I think is one of his pros. I think he has best clinch strikes. The way he grabs the head and goes for the knee. Those are all great, guys, as well as great feints and great distance management. It's hard to even land clean on him. Now, here's the problem with everything I said. He is a great counter striker. He has these great clinch strikes, solid head movement. I've noticed, like, even those knees in the body, like to the clinching sometimes, or like he'll run in, he'll counter you with the knee like he was doing against Volkanovski. That striking works against people his height or shorter by default. Of course, you could grab have a Muay Thai clinch and throw a knee up the middle to someone's head when they're 5'9" like you, or their Volkanovski height is 5'6". You know, of course, you could counter with knees coming in when the person is really short. Islam is not near the height of Ian Garry, so it might negate some of his best weapons. This is why I'm very implicit on the striking advantage that I always say Islam has over all these guys. I have a harder time seeing him have it against Ian Garry because of length, because of size, because of disadvantagement, you know. And it's great being a counter striker, but when two counter strikers meet, there's somebody who wins. And I'm explain it when I start. I'm gonna explain it a little bit deeper when I get into the striking comparison. But usually the guy who wins when both guys are counter strikers is the guy who can use their strikes from a distance, you know, to avoid getting into any counter situation. So, for example, if Islam and Ian Garry are both counter strikers, it could be like Izzy Romero. Who won that fight? Izzy. Why did Izzy win that fight? Because he was insistent on, if we're both counter strikers standing in front of each other, I'm going to just throw more leg kicks than you. So Izzy outlanded him. That was a boring fight. That's pretty weird example, but it's an example of two counter strikers who are standing in front of each other. The guy on the outside, who typically is going to be the longer guy who's winning these when counter strikers collide scenarios, they're probably on the outside landing some kicks, avoiding like getting into boxing exchanges because they're scared to trade with the counter striker. They're gonna win by default, you know. So Islam's a great counter striker. He has great movement. He has great clinch strikes, but a lot of these things work against people around his size. From what I've seen, that's all I could go off of what I've seen. You know, I can't go off of things I haven't seen. So I'd be a little bit delusional to still say that what I've always been saying, Islam's gonna have the striking advantage, because like it works against certain people, and I just haven't seen it work against someone like Ian Garry, because I haven't seen him go against someone like Ian Garry. Time will tell, but I do really love Islam striking. It is very high level, and which is why I was so insistent he was going to outstrike JDM like he did, and he will outstrike a lot of some of these other guys, but he's in a weight class where these guys are big and they're strong, you know. I think Ian Garry is a perfect test to see how he does against a lanky opponent, because they're going to be people like Morales who are also big and have the physicality advantage. Ian Garry doesn't have that physicality advantage, so that's a good thing. But I will say he's a great counter striker for what he is. As far as cons go, I say he's too safe of a striker for this opponent. Usually being too safe for a striker, or it wouldn't be a bad thing. Usually for cons, I don't put much, but he does do that thing where he leans back and does a check hook, you know. That, you know, people with like who combo punch could exploit that. Ian Garry could actually exploit that later in the fight if it's a primary striking match, you know. But I just think a con for this fight is that he's too safe. Like, it sounds delusional to say someone's too safe, but in my opinion, he is too safe in this fight. Like, he's too safe of a striker to go against Ian Garry, because he could just get picked out from the outside, you know. And yeah, if he like plays that seesaw game with Ian Garry and he thinks it's a counter striking match, and Ian Garry explodes into like his little flow state boxing thing I always talk about, it's going to be a problem for Islam Makhachev. It really is. So those are the pros and cons for both fighters. As far as how does their striking compare, I think Garry will have the striking advantage, as I've been prefacing this whole time. This is the first time in Islam Makhachev's career where I personally feel like going into the fight, he's not going to have a striking advantage. I think the stomps will be frustrating to get through. I don't know about painful. He could actually compromise that leg, like I said. Islam Makhachev, he moves, he bounces nice. He has naturally flat feet, but I've always said to beat Islam, someone's going to need to take away that front leg, because by default, taking away a front leg slows down the shots. It does a lot of good things, you know, so the stomps will be frustrating to get through, but Islam must take chances. He has to. He has to take some. Going against a longer fighter, people got to get out the mindset to take some, bro. Pause. Like, they got to take damage, you know. And I always see, like, even when you go to a gym as a tall guy, naturally, like, a lot of these guys are like, they give me too much respect, bro. Like, take chances, bro. It's like they almost take a chance, and then they last second pull away. Like, they throw, and I'm like, boom, 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 and they pull away. Like, gang, come take a shot. Like, when you pressure us, bro, we're nervous. And it actually happens with Ian Garry too. He gets pressured, looks a bit flustered against the fence, you know. But they get into this this falsehood of like, oh, he's too long, like, it's too hard to close the distance, bro. You have to you guys got to take shots to give some when you're going against a taller opponent. Doesn't apply to the tall opponents. We don't have to take shots to give some. We could just keep giving shots without taking some until you decide to, all right, I'm gonna take that shot, or I'm gonna try to slip that shot, and I'm gonna come back and fire. Islam must take chances. It's gonna be a weird figuring out process, is my thing, because it's his first time going against someone. He doesn't really have an opposition to, like, you know, copy that. I think they brought in Joe Alvarez. I haven't seen any footage. Like, that could have been just a rumor. Who knows? But Islam has to take chances and he has to take a shot. So Islam's not going to be unscathed, I don't think, in this fight if a lot of the fight is on the feet. I think Islam will be surprisingly hard to land clean on, though, because I do think he has a good head movement. And I do think, like, if Garry does get into that little boxing flow state, Islam might just clinch up and stuff or something, you know. But I think Garry will overall land more volume. So as far as the striking comparison goes, I do favor Ian Garry. So Islam's first time in his life, in my opinion, he's not going to have a striking advantage. I have to just be transparent there. And that's what I think makes this fight interesting and a little bit more challenging, you know. So striking definitely favors Garry. Surprise. Maybe some people are saying the opposite, but I've noticed the way Islam strikes, it wouldn't work against a tall guy. I'm just saying that. Maybe I have a little bit tall guy bias because when I spar these guys, I tall guy, but I'm just being as objective as possible as a huge Islam fan. Going into the grappling, though, let's talk about it, because there's some things that I'm going to talk about that no one in the world has talked about. First of all, Grappling Pros, solid takedown defense for his frame. He has BJJ knowledge, and he defends clinch wrestling well. So when I say clinch wrestling, I mean wrestling specifically against the fence. He defends it pretty well. He has solid takedown defense for his frame. So when you watch Ian Garry, he gets pretty low. Like in the Bilal fight, you can see him. He gets pretty low, and he like frames off a lot. He uses his frame to like almost keep his hips as far away as possible from his opposition, which could open up head kicks. But I also think he could just get his arms up pretty well. But you'll see in the Bilal fight that he framed off pretty well, and he'll do enough to frame off in the open octagon, which is the most dangerous to get place to get taken down, and then like get himself to the fence. And then he trusts his defensive fence wrestling, which is really good to me. I think he defends really well in the clinch and the fence. So those are his 3 pros, and I think he does all of them pretty well. Also his movement, of course, it's hard to track him down, you know, but when you do go for a takedown, he's going to do a good job getting his hips as far away as possible and getting himself to the fence, and then trusting himself to defend against the fence, which if you look at his Shavkat fight, a lot of time spent against the fence against Shavkat trying to take him down and not succeeding. Same with Bilal, but a Shavkat Bilal, Islam Makhachev, of course not, but it does show me that his understanding of takedown defense against the fence is actually pretty high level and is pretty good, especially for his frame, guys. People think it's easier to take down lanky people. That's not the case. It's harder to lift them off their feet. They could post with their hand while still defending. You know, there's a lot of things they could do, you know, so it should be interesting. As far as grappling pros, the Garry Lock. This is something I've never seen anyone talk about that we're going to talk about in this video. I call it the Garry Lock. Ian Garry gets taken down, and when he's in full guard, he wraps his legs around the person and just traps them on top of him in full guard. It's a purely defensive position. This defensive position is used to avoid the person from transitioning while they're on top of you. But it does nothing outside of that. You're accepting the position. You're in a losing position. After seeing Islam versus JDM, like, I know Islam said he wasn't proud of that performance, but it'd be a little bit stupid to not only hold Islam on top of you, but try to keep him there. But I think he would try to do it because he will do it. He's going to do the Garry Lock. And now, when he did it against Shavkat, because that's the prominent fight I watched it on, I was thinking to myself, what kind of stupid play is this? Even Shavkat was able to posture up and start landing shots, but I was like, why is he doing that? I was like, oh, maybe it's because Shavkat's really good grappling threat, so he's nervous he's going to get submitted, doesn't want him to advance guard. I get it. Then as I kept watching, like kept going down and watching every one of his fights, he does it every time. He did it against Michael Venom Page, and I was thinking, wait, so are you actually scared that Michael Venom Page is going to advance into a position and submit you? Or are you just doing something that you were drilled to do, and now it's like by default something you do when you're panicked or in a bad position? You know, like, you have no business to be that worried about MVP, like, and just securing a really bad position for yourself. So that shit's it's just stupid. It like burns out your leg. You're on the bottom, burning out your leg. And then like when someone starts punching him from that position, he panics a bit, so he kind of opens it. But it's bad. Like, oh man, it's going to be bad. The Garry Lock's going to be his demise in this fight. It shows me he's very green off his back. He has the whole, like, my BJJ's pretty good, but he's actually pretty damn green off his back. He's panics off his back, and he's not like he's throwing up an absurd amount of submissions. He's just actually locking you on top of him, maybe trying to throw some 12 to 6 elbows, but not really doing much outside of that. That's a very stupid thing to do against a high-level grappler, and it's going to get exploited really bad. So the Garry Lock that nobody's talking about for some reason in this fight is going to be one of the most important things essentially, it's one of the most important things to show that he's very green off his back, because he doesn't really know what to do except for secure a purely defensive position because he's scared. So that's a con that I noticed, and it's definitely his biggest con. Like I said, when you do footage, you start to get surprised about how many things you missed. I missed the Garry Lock. It's probably why no one else is talking about it, because they don't watch footage. Like they missed something this big. Like you can't, like it shows his inexperience that he's gonna do a purely defensive lock every time he's on the ground. And do it against someone as technical as Islam Makhachev, may God have mercy on your soul. As far as Islam Makhachev, what is his grappling pros? He's the best grappler in UFC history. Great timing on his attempts. It's not like he's Usman or Bilal. He doesn't time sloppy attempts. He has great timing on almost every single one of his attempts with a very strong single leg, and he has a quick double leg. I like his single leg. If you actually look at the way Shavkat Rakhmonov took down Ian Garry, he had this single leg and kind of muscled him in the ground. It actually reminded me very much of when Islam took down JDM, if you guys remember that takedown. It was a very strong single leg where he kind of muscled him down, which is, it's going to work against Ian Garry in the open fence. I'm sure Ian Garry's going to try to stuff that, like I said, and get his back to the fence and try to wrestle, because in the open mat, I think Islam's going to have his way with him. Also, I said quick double leg. He just times his double leg really quickly. Like, I seen him time a double leg really good against JDM. He gets to the hips really quick. He drives really well. So he's just a really good attempter when it comes to wrestling. I said he has great fence wrestling. So there's going to be a very interesting thing I talk about when I compare their grappling overall. But Islam does have good fence wrestling. He does do things where he gets people against the fence, pulls them off, and secures some good takedowns. And that's where the fight's going to be won. I'm going to say a lot of the grappling instances. Then I said he has strong submission game and heavy top pressure. So he's going to be heavy on top. So if Garry does a Garry Lock, he's going to be getting a forearm to the neck, landing some punches, and that's going to actually open up his Garry Lock guard. And then after that, I really see Islam easily transitioning through positions with his heavy top pressure and attacking submissions. I think once this fight gets to the ground, guys, it's going to be very much of a tough ask for him. So Islam is just the best grappler in UFC history. And when he's on top of you, may God have mercy on you. So that's the best way I can put it. When Islam gets on top of you, it's just very difficult to deal with someone that talented and just that good. And I feel like Ian Garry's just not great off his back, and he hasn't shown me anything off his back except for the Garry Lock. As far as the cons go, none, but I said he's a sub-first grappler, which could lead to stalling, or what it looks like to be stalling, or a very uneventful fight. And honestly, that him being a sub-first grappler and Garry going to be purely defensive when he's on his back could lead to stalling, maybe not in half guard as much, but rather in full guard. But it's going to lead to Garry getting his face punched in. He's got to abandon that game plan. But he's not going to abandon it because he's done it every time, which shows me that it's purely an instinctual thing. And when you're actually in there getting punched in the face, you usually run off pure instinct. So I do think when he gets him down, it's going to be a pure instinct battle. And that's when Islam's going to be on top of him, landing good shots. And I think once he opens up that guard, it might be game over. That brings me to the grappling comparison. Fence wrestling will decide the winner. I'm saying this because it's going to be hard for Islam to get in the open cage against Ian Garry, just because Ian Garry moves so well. So I don't see him shooting or scoring that easily in the open. But what I see happening is that Ian Garry uses movement a lot, and then when Islam does shoot in the open, he does that thing where he's framing off and then settling for the fence. So I think Gary's going to use his length to defend and just kind of frame off and push himself against the fence, and then Islam will use his pressure to get him to the fence. So it's going to literally come down to the fence wrestling, which by what I've seen from Ian Garry, he does a really good job defending defense wrestling. Against Shavkat, he showed it. Against Bilal, he showed it. He defends well against the fence. But like I said, those guys aren't Islam. But then again, is it going to look easy for Islam? I do think Islam's eventually going to get him down. And when he gets him down, he does whatever he wants with him on the ground. But that doesn't change the fact that I think that it's going to still be tough to score takedowns on him, especially in the open. But even in the open, if he gets a single leg, I can see him muscling him down as well. When we look at Islam's fence wrestling, sometimes he stomps his foot and lifts to secure the takedowns in the fence, against the fence. That can't work against a 6'3" opponent, because usually when you stomp down and lift, if you're the same height as the person, you can actually get them off the feet, or you're shorter, you can get them off the feet. 6'3" guy, you stomp and lift, he's going to just be on his toes at most. You're not going to get him off his feet. What he can do is he could do what he did against Armin, which is pull him off the fence and then force him to the center and wrestle. Or use his trips. He's gonna have to use his trips. That's the best way you could take him down against the fence. But what I've seen, Ian Garry has really good balance, and it's hard to actually trip him. I'm telling you, the fence wrestling will decide the winner of this fight. I said this about Max Charles too, and I was 100% correct. It seemed like Max could defend against the fence. So we'll see if Ian could defend against the fence. It's gonna be tough. It's kind of tough to see who will win the fence exchanges, but I do know that's where the fight's gonna be won. It's not gonna be won in the open mat, because I just feel like Ian Garry will do a really good job moving a lot and defending against the open mat. And Ian Garry's circling usually gets him against the fence anyway. So So it's going to be a fence wrestling thing that decides the winner, decides the winner of the fight. Because if Ian Gary's defending against the fence, getting free, going back to the center of the octagon, oh my God, good luck, Islam. You're lost. Congrats. So that is what it is there. As far as path to victory, if Ian Garry does this, he will 100% win. There's no if, whats, or buts about it. If he uses his movement and stomps, then randomly blitzes. So what I'm saying is using his movement, circling a lot, doing a lot of stomps, low kicks on the outside. I'm talking for 2-3 minutes of at the start of every round. Don't stand in front of him. Just be you. Don't even box too much. Just use your stomps. And then you blitz and you have your little flow state boxing. When Islam Makhachev's getting frustrated, feeling oh my God, I'm chasing him. All he's doing is low kicking and running. You explode into a 1-2 uppercut, boom, and then maybe finish with a head kick. Then you go back and resort to moving and circling. That's going to be frustrating because you're going to have someone like Islam Makhachev who's not used to chasing, now chasing, still eating those oblique kicks. And then every time he's thinking the oblique kicks coming, maybe you go up top with a head kick or something. That can be very problematic. I do think Islam's going to be pretty smart with defending kicks because he goes against people like Chanko, who are world-class Muay Thai people, and spars with people like Usman, who has great question mark kicks. He might see those head kicks coming, but it's just different from a guy with long legs and a longer frame. So I think if Garry uses his movement, stomps, low kicks, and then uses his random blitzes and his boxing exchanges out the blue, he could actually succeed very well. I said defend using your frame and then settle for the fence wrestling. So even in the open, doesn't matter what's happening, you have to use your frame to push off, get your hips away from it as far as possible, and then you got to settle for the fence wrestling. He has to choose to fence wrestle rather than try to defend in the open. That's what's going to win him the fight. If he could try to just use his frame to get his back against the fence, he'll do a good job, a really good job in this fight. Like I said, it's going to come down to the fence wrestling, and what I've seen from Ian Garry, he's really good at defending against the fence, but then again, Islam is not Shavkat or Bilal. Maybe Shavkat's stronger though, so that could even be worse. Shavkat had some tough attempts that Ian Garry just didn't get taken down by. I was like, how is Ian Garry still keeping his balance? So Ian Garry's a talented kid, dude. He's fucking talented, clearly, because he does a good job with his balance. So that's what he has to do. He has to settle for the fence wrestling and hope that Islam can't pull him off the fence and kind of get him to the ground with some trips or muscle him down. Last thing I said is not last thing, but one of the other things I said is to win the first 3 rounds. When fatigued late, do the Garry Lock. So I'm actually saying that little Garry Lock con. If Ian Garry gets ahead on the scorecards, the last 4 rounds come and it comes down to just you have to submit or Islam needs to finish to win. Ian's going to continue doing what I said he should do in the very first row, which is use his movement, use his stomps, and probably going to be less blitzes, but it's going to be a lot more low kick circle. He'll eventually get taken down, I feel like, when he does that. Maybe get a kick timed late on the fight, but when he does get taken down, it's probably going to be later in the round by then. Islam, probably had to catch up by then. If you do the Garry Lock, it'll help you not get finished. So even at if Islam gets him down, the Garry Lock will actually help him late because it's probably going to trap Islam in full guard and make Islam not be able to do any submissions because you can't really submit someone from full guard. You just really can't do much from there, So the Garry Lock could help him late. I'm going to say that. But I think it's a very winnable fight if the fight is kept standing majority of the fight. It's one of those fights that if you use, and then the visual from the referees of defending against the fence, getting off, and then getting back to circling and low kicking, the visual is tough for the wrestler. So I think this is very winnable. Matter of fact, I'm going to say this before I get to Islam's path to victory. It's easier to impose this path to victory than Islam's, but it's also one of those easier said than done things because I'm saying settle for fence wrestling in this. Keep in mind, I'm saying settle for fence wrestling. If he can't defend against a fence, he's screwed, isn't he? So saying settle for fence wrestling is just a bad thing, but it's better than trying to wrestle with Islam in the open. So I don't mind him using his movement and kind of circling near the fence and him having the fence against his back, because if he's able to defend against the fence, which I'm probably sure he's drilling, he'll have a field day with Islam. He's going to make it look really easy and everyone's going to be confused on how Ian Garry washed Islam that well. So let me keep in mind, Ian Garry doesn't have to change much about how he usually fights to win this fight. He just has to defend really well and make sure he doesn't get taken down. As far as the path to victory is concerned for Islam Makhachev, he has to, first of all, fight differently. Let me just associate that and let you guys know. But I said, use feints to back Ian Garry against the fence, then shoot. So you're going to notice I'm saying something about both guys. You want to get the person to the fence for the most part. Get him to the fence and trust that fence wrestling. Then I said, when you're in the fence and you're in the clinch, trip and throw in the clinch. Don't try to lift. So I've seen Islam in the past try to lift and he secures it and he takes them down. It's not going to work against a 6'3" guy, in my opinion. You might lift him. Even if you lift him off his feet, he might just frame and then be able to get back to the fence. But if you try to trip or like throw him or like pull him away from the fence, get him to the center, body lock him, and go for some kind of trips there, that's when the takedown's going to secure the best. But he can't try to lift in the clinch, because if he tries to lift Ian Garry in the clinch, he's going to be using a lot of energy trying to lift a taller, longer guy, and it's probably not going to go his way. So it's going to lead to Islam fatiguing himself and not completing the clinch wrestling, which is going to get Ian Garry getting more comfortable in defending against the clinch, which eventually is going to, like I said, lead to Ian Garry winning, because after he separates from that, he'll just go back to outpointing him. So those are something very important. Like, not just try to get Ian Garry against the fence and wrestle, but do the right takedowns. I know you're not used to wrestling people like that, so you're probably practicing in the gym with people who are shorter, but you got to get used to tripping and throwing more, which I feel like he does very well already. Then I said take chances on the feet to open up takedowns. If he's going to be his usual self, kind of waiting for the other person to lead, the takedowns aren't going to open up, because it's just not going to work, because Ian Garry's not going to like blitz in moments he's expecting it, so it's going to be hard to time. He's going to have to make Ian Garry take risks. I think he should use his feints too. Like I said, the feints Islam does, it's going to cause reactions out of Garry, because Garry naturally is so worried about the takedown that he's going to be very twitchy, and if he does that thing where he kind of frames off, he's going to leave his head kick there and shit. So feint, man, you got to feint. He always feints. That's not something crazy, but do take chances. Like, do try to land some combos. Do chain together some combos, because like I said, you can exploit the head movement deficiency that sometimes Ian Garry suffers with if you continuously throw combos, because he just leans back and that's kind of it. He leans back and he kind of turns the corner towards the end. But if you do 1-1-2 or like try to chain something together, you usually 9 times out of 10 are actually going to land on Ian Garry. So Islam Makhachev should do that. Then I said use ground and pound to open up the Garry lock, force scrambles, and find the sub. This is actually where I think he's going to win the fight and how he can win it. So when Garry has him in the Garry lock, which is going to happen, I'm telling you, when he has him and kind of locks him to full guard, kind of posture up, land some slicing elbows, that's going to cause Ian Garry to open up the guard, like kind of posture up. He's going to open up the guard, get into half guard from there, and I really see him being able to execute things like arm triangles, maybe a Darce choke off a scramble. Probably not Darce choke, because I feel like Ian's going to be protective there. But I really think an arm triangle off a scramble is going to work, or some kind of arm bar or something like that, or triangle. We'll see. But I do think ground and pound is something Islam doesn't do too often, but he's going to need to do it to open up the Garry lock, force scrambles, then find the sub. So, like I said, from Ian's path to victory, you see, I'm just pretty much telling Ian to do what you do, but like defend as like the best you ever did in your life, which is possible. Easier to execute if you're Ian Garry. Islam, I'm saying things like take chances on the feet and use ground and pound. Something Islam isn't, he's not that he doesn't know how to ground and pound, but like things like take chances on the feet, he's not used to doing that much, because he goes against people who are shorter than him and that he could like use his reach against and kind of use his counter striking and works really well against. So you're going to notice that Ian Garry's path to victory is easier to execute than Islam Makhachev's path to victory. Important factors before I get into my full prediction. Islam must fight differently, and then Ian Garry can't give him multiple takedowns. It will obviously come down to two of these things. Islam having to fight differently, and Ian Garry not being able to, or like not giving up too much takedowns. Now, we know which game plan is easier to execute. I'm doing this and I'm picking off logic. I'm not picking off favoritism, and I have come down to my winner of this fight. It's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be competitive in a stylistic standpoint. Sometimes stylistic fights that pose new problems for either or could still end up being an easy fight. That being said, my prediction for who's going to win the fight, I think Islam by sub. I think that's going to be what happens. I think Islam by sub or points if like the stalling happens, but I really see Islam finishing Ian Garry before the end of it. I think Garry will start well with his stomps. He's going to use his distance well, dictate most things. Islam Makhachev's going to have like a, hopefully not too long, because I think he's going to have an adjustment period in this fight. I will say the adjustment period bleeds into the third round. That's where gray area starts to come. I'm hoping he adjusts this very well. Like I'm talking about like first 2-3 minutes. He's going to have to adjust to that stomping and that running. He's going to have to find out how to track him down. And I think he will. And I believe he will. Because like I said, his fight IQ, his game planning is usually top notch. I said eventually Islam gets him down. That's what it's going to come to. And there's just levels there. So you're going to notice in like a lot of the breakdowns I say is like Gary's defensive grappling and his cons there are a bit too massive. Whereas the striking differential is pretty big. But I will say, like I said, Islam doesn't really get hit too clean. So I feel like the grappling, the disproportionate grappling advantage is more major in a fight like this, because like I said, clinch wrestling is something that Ian Garry finds himself in every fight. Same with Islam. So we're going to see wrestling, we're going to see grappling, You know, and I believe eventually, like, Islam's going to take him down at least once. And then once that happens, it's demoralizing, one, for Ian Garry. It's going to be smothering. Islam does a good job with his top pressure to kind of draining energy. So maybe that's going to negate some movement from Ian Garry. And that's going to open up the window for Islam Makhachev to start running away from it. Then I said the arm triangle specifically is very possible. I think Islam's going to win by an arm triangle specifically. I think after he breaks the Garry Lock by landing some ground and pound, he's going to get into half guard. And then from half guard, he's going to find his way into an arm triangle position. And then Ian Garry's going to try to scramble out the arm triangle, but the squeeze is going to be too tight. Then I see Ian Garry typing to an arm triangle. I said Islam could actually make this look easy somehow. I'm saying this because if he does a good job evading most of the shots and not taking too much low kicks, I think I could actually see him getting to the fence or getting to the shot, whether it's in the open or against the fence, securing it and kind of breaking down Ian Garry, whether it's getting his back and just like smothering him, making Ian Garry uncomfortable. A lot of the fights you see from Ian Garry, like you said, he does a really good job defending. So we haven't seen Ian Garry get taken down like in the very first round and kind of smothered. I don't know how that's going to affect his cardio too much. His cardio looks good when he's kind of dictating everything. But if he's getting taken down and kind of muscled and like kind of like he's not going to have the strength to finish here. Like Islam's going to actually weigh more than Ian Garry on fight night. Yes, he's going to be giving up some weight, but Islam's the more natural welterweight, unironically, in this fight. Ian Garry, maybe Ian Garry puts on more weight than usual, but Islam Makhachev is just a big dude. So I feel like that strength advantage is going to be prevalent in some of the scrambles and some of the grappling exchanges that like maybe Ian Garry would have won if he's a bit stronger, but he's not going to have the strength. And like this, like I said, when Islam gets a squeeze in, I do see Islam Makhachev just being too much and making Ian Garry panic tap as soon as possible, even if it's not even under the neck or it's nothing fully tight, whatever the submission is. Like I said, I really do think it's going to be an arm triangle, but I can't see a rear naked choke as well, or some kind of darts or head triangle, but yeah, head and arm or arm triangle. I think that's what's gonna happen in this fight. I think it's gonna be a good fight. I think it's competitive, but after footage, I'd say like I'm a bit nervous, but I think I got the pick right. Like I don't really miss with this one. I took this one really seriously, especially coming off the Usman one. I was like, I just ruined a 100% streak that's now not still 100%. All right, I'm not letting my bias pick get me to me. This is not a bias pick. This is a pick based on logic. Now you're gonna, like I said, it's easier for Ian Garry to execute his path to victory, but the difference is the reason I believe Islam can execute a path to victory enough to get him to win is because he's always shown that. So it's almost like a conflicting thing where like, yes, Islam has to do some things he never done before, but the track record of Islam consistently coming in with good game plans and good fight IQ, I believe that's going to lead to him having an appropriate game plan to beat someone because he hasn't not done that so far. So even though Ian Garry's game plan is easier to execute, you're going to notice in some of Ian Garry's game plan, I said, make sure you get into the fence for the fence wrestling. But what if Ian Garry can't stop that? There's a lot of question marks in this fight, of course, but I believe the smart pick based on logic of watching every single one of these fights in over 100+ hours is that Islam Makhachev will defeat Ian Garry at UFC 330. And it's going to be a fun fight. I can't wait for it. And I can't wait for Islam Makhachev to be the undisputed GOAT because that is what he is if he goes up and beats JDM and then defends his belt against Ian Garry, who's one of the best fighters in the UFC today. Islam Makhachev is on his way to the GOAT status, and Ian Garry, he's just a pawn in this game. Let me know your thoughts down below. It's just for me, and God bless. 2, 3.